Hello, stranger. Summer is now finally without a doubt over, and with it, the time of year when I'm just not on my computer a whole lot unless I absolutely cannot avoid it. And therefore, it's also the time of year when I don't make a lot of videos or answer a lot of comments. Thank you, everybody who left comments, and I'm sorry. And I didn't really have any real incentive to make videos either, because my reading, it hasn't been the best of reading years, to put it mildly, at least for about the first two-thirds of the year. It's getting a little bit better. I thought about doing the mid-year book freakout tag, but I wouldn't even have known what books to talk about anyway. I had big plans for my summer break, a big TBR, but that went out the window when I was sick for the first half of my break and got stuck in a mindless comfort reading rut. So summer was overall a really sleepy time when it comes to reading, but that ends now. I don't plan to do a big reading catch-up video because we are getting close to end of the year content anyway, so I plan to do a lot of that instead. So this is just a little currently reading or just read or plan to be reading soon video to get me back into the groove. So let's start with what I just read, the book that I last finished reading, and that is a very seasonal read in a way. It's At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. This is cosmic horror, I guess, so it's the perfect novella for Halloween reading. And I'm happy to report that I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure if I was going to because I'd never read anything by H.P. Lovecraft before, and you hear such differing opinions about him and the quality of his writing, the enjoyability of his writing. And I can see that a lot of people wouldn't get along with the style of this novella in particular. It is written as a first-person account of a member of a scientific expedition to Antarctica at the end of the 19th century, I think, and the person who's writing it is the geologist of the party. And he is writing this because countries and corporations are making plans for mining projects in Antarctica, and he is going to tell them and the public why this is a very bad idea, why it is a bad idea to drill holes and mines into the ground in Antarctica, because he saw something and witnessed something when he went there, and he's been silent about it, but it is time to break the silence now. Probably the last ever opportunity for him to break the silence before something very bad happens. And he gives this account in a very sober and, yes, kind of dry fashion, because anything else, any other style, would of course compromise his credibility. But the language can also be quite complicated, and if I had to hazard a guess, I would guess that this is Lovecraft's preference and not just the preference of his character. He always uses three words when one would have sufficed. For instance, this is one of the most egregious examples. Something isn't just inexplicable, no, he says it wholly transcends explanation, that kind of thing, you know. So I can understand that a lot of people get impatient with this style, but for me it really worked because it also made for very detailed descriptions of the sights that our characters saw in Antarctica. And I got a really great sense of place, even though the place that he describes, of course, doesn't exactly exist the way he describes it. So for me, this was a really pleasant surprise. Unlike the last book that I DNF'd just yesterday, it was The Children of Men by P.D. James. This imagines a future in which people, human beings, can't procreate anymore, and the last child that was ever born, the last human child, was born in, I think, the year 1998. This was written in 1992, if I'm not mistaken. Last child born in 1998 died at the beginning of the year 2021, and this is when the book is set. This ostensibly at least explores what a future would look like in which such a thing happens to humanity. But this was a case, I'm sure you know, the kind of reading experience where it becomes extremely clear to you that this book and this author has nothing to say that would be of any merit, any teaching value to you, that would give you any remarkable insights or showed you a thought from a side that you hadn't really considered before. And this is what happened with me and this book, and I made it about 35 pages before I gave up and never looked back. One of the books that I'm currently reading is just a little treat. It is this little bind-up of 2 short stories by Hermann Hesse, one set in the summer and one, I think, the second one in the bleak midwinter, or so I've heard. Haven't gotten to that one yet. And the thing with a lot of Hermann Hesse's stories, not all of them, but a lot of them, you could call them at worst corny and at best pretty basic. However, they always ring so true that they always affect you greatly anyway, and they never seem frivolous. And that is why they are always such a treat. And another absolute treat is one that was published only last week, and I mean to get to it this weekend. It is the new Asterix comic. So, public service information, there is a new Asterix out. This one is Asterix in Lusitania in Portugal. And I'm so excited, so curious, because the new comics, since the old creator died, have been a bit of an up and down. But this is volume 41 and volume 39, Asterix and the Griffin. Hasn't been a crowd favorite, but it is one of my absolute favorites. Not just my favorite of the new ones, but I think it is one of the best ones ever. And so I'm not a hater of the new Asterix comics, and so I'm very happy to have this in my hands and to read it this weekend. I am also finally, at long last, once more in a really big epic fantasy reading mood right now. Lots of it is thanks to one of my favorite authors, Ted Williams, who came to Munich last week, and I went to a book reading of his. He is the author of what's probably my favorite modern epic fantasy series or trilogy, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I made a recommendation video about it, which I will link in the description box. I've been to an event with him before, actually, but that one was 20 years ago, when The War of the Flowers, a fantasy standalone or steampunk fantasy standalone of his, had just come out. So, of course, The War of the Flowers was the book that I brought for him to sign. But last week I finally had the chance to get Memory, Sorrow and Thorn signed, or more precisely, the volume with my favorite cover art, which is To Green Angel Tower Part 1. But the book he was talking about and reading from at last week's event was actually The Navigator's Children, which is the last book, the last of 4 books in the Last King of Osten art series, which is kind of a sequel series to Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, featuring a lot of the same characters. I own copies of the first 2 books in that series, but I've always been reluctant to touch them and to read them, because what if I don't like them? However, everybody has always been full of praise about this series, even die-hard fans of the original Memory, Sorrow and Thorn books. So I think I'm finally going to take the plunge and start reading the first book soon, which is The Witchwood Crown. However, I thought before I'm going to delve into a new series, I should probably finish the other big epic fantasy series that I was in the middle of, or that I had read 4 out of 5 books from, and that is A Chorus of Dragons by Jen Lyons, and the last book is The Discord of Gods, which I have now read 130 pages from out of about 700, so I'm a good chunk of the way in, and I'm absolutely loving it. It is such fun. The series as a whole has been a bit of an up and down, or more precisely, one book was a down, and that is book 2, and I am so glad that after reading book 1 I went out and bought the whole 5-book series, because if I hadn't already owned the books, I think I might have abandoned the series after book 2, or a third of the way through book 2, because it is just so bad. It reads like it was written on Tumblr. But with book 3 we went sky high again, and book 4 was also fantastic, and so far I am really enjoying book 5. I think this is going to be a really epic, really stressful, yet on the other hand also really fun finale. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book and this series as we are approaching the end of the year, because it's definitely going to appear on some lists. So this is what's been going on here lately. I have a lot more spooky books on my reading list for the end of this month and for November, and lots of wintry books already lined up on my TBR for the end of the year, the beginning of the next year. But more about that in another video. Guys, for watching and for sticking around, even though I haven't been around a lot lately. But this time I will see you again very soon. Bye.